Well, Tim, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was a complete surprise. And I was determined I wasn't going to lose it tonight. And I'm afraid you just made me break that pledge. Michael was a dear, dear friend. I met him for the first time in 1976 here in Florida at a Region 2 conference in Miami Beach, and about which I'll say more in a moment. But he was indeed a very, very, very special person, and he just left us so suddenly. It was hard to describe our feeling of loss at that time. Well, thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see so many old friends in the room, to be able to put faces to familiar call signs. I am retiring after 34 years of leading the ARRL headquarters staff. I have worked for the last few years on being the least essential employee for day-to-day operations. I don't do much on QST anymore except page 9, it seems to us, which I'll say a bit more about later. We've assembled a great staff thanks to Harold and to Barry Shelley, N1VXY, the Chief Financial Officer, who's home minding the store. Harold, as has been pointed out, is retiring in 2.5 weeks, and we will all miss him. And on Spectrum Defense, which has been my first love since the 70s, I am able to pass that responsibility on to Brennan Price, N4QX, who is here. But as has been pointed out, and I can shorten my speech here because others have said it so well, ARRL is in essence an organization of volunteers. It's all of you in this room who do things for the League directly, or through your clubs, or through your other activities to support the advancement of the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio, and that is a phrase you will hear often. Amateur radio could not afford a professional staff to do everything that needs to be done on behalf of amateur radio at all levels, international, national, state, and local. ARRL headquarters is a service center to support members and especially volunteers, and to ensure continuity of essential activities, such as advocacy. So, for that reason, as General Manager and later as Executive Vice President and CEO, I have tried to keep the focus on the volunteers, who now are so ably led by Rick Roderick. Over the years, I have not talked much about myself in QST or in speeches, but every one of us, every radio amateur, has a story of how they became involved in amateur radio and how it has influenced his or her life. I'm going to tell you mine, and then I'm going to tell you somebody else's. Okay, I'm a Connecticut native, and at age 10, my uncle gave me a crystal radio kit. It was the old-fashioned kind with a cat's whisker and the galena, and I played with that for hours and hours and couldn't even hear the local broadcast station. And then one night, this booming Columbia, the gem of the ocean, comes in through my headphones, and it's the Voice of America transmitter, WLWO, near Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm in southeastern Connecticut. How's the signal getting 600 miles? Well, I'm 10 years old. I didn't process that right away. My obsession was baseball. So a couple of years later, after my father, who had by then suffered through 5 years of managing my Little League baseball team, recognized I had no talent there, he arranged for a family friend to give me a couple of shortwave radios. And then he encouraged me to get a license. So at age 13, I became a novice KN1ZND. And upgraded as fast as I could. And by the way, in those days, it took 7 weeks for the license to come in from Gettysburg. So at age 14, I know ARRL is a volunteer organization at its essence because at age 14, I became one. I became Assistant Emergency Coordinator for New London County, Connecticut. And I forged the signature of the Emergency Coordinator on the certificate for a reason that I know one person in this room will understand, and that's our Connecticut section manager, Betsy Doan, K1EIC, because Betsy knew Bud Ward, WNGEA. Excuse me. Rick's not the only one who gets emotional here. Bud was born with cerebral palsy. He spent his entire life in a wheelchair. In the early 50s, Coronet magazine, which was a kind of a Reader's Digest magazine of the time, wrote an article about the wheelchair wizard of radio, and that was Bud Ward. He trained returning GIs from World War II in radio, TV repair, and electronics. He was self-taught. He ran the radio, TV repair shop himself. After he ran out of GIs, he started recruiting high school kids. So at age 14, I went to work in Bud's shop after school. Obviously, I learned a great deal more working with Bud than electronics. I learned not to judge people by their apparent disabilities, because he had certainly overcome his. So I got involved in CW Traffic Nets, and Tom and I have compared notes on this, and we've found that we had a similar experience. It was the first time in my life that I was treated as a peer by adults. You know, here I am, 14 years old, I'm checking into a CW Traffic Net. They don't care how old I am. They only care, am I reliable? Am I accurate? And will I follow directions from the net control? It was a formative experience in my life, and Tom has said the same thing, and I've talked with others who have said very much the same. So it was a very important part of my maturing. Well, by the time I went to college in 1967, I had made 20,000 QSOs. You know, different people waste their youth in different ways. I have a written record of mine. And so in 1967, I went off to Michigan State University in East Lansing. Go Spartans. And you would wonder, why would somebody from Connecticut go to Michigan State University? Some people have assumed I must be from Michigan because I went there. But no, I went to Michigan State because the club station, W8SH, had a complete Collins S line. Including a 30S1. So that sealed the deal as far as I was concerned. I've never told my parents that story, by the way. Well, I came back from my first year, actually my first quarter out there, and came to Newington and stopped in to see Ellen White, W1YL, who was at the contest dinner last night. And anybody here was at the contest dinner? Yeah, lots of you. You heard Ellen. You heard her say that she hired me for my first job at ARRL headquarters, and she did indeed. On June 10th, 1968, I showed up as a summer employee checking DX contest logs. And went back again after I graduated college in 1970. I went back and worked for a while longer. But then, contrary to popular opinion, I did not spend my entire career with ARRL. I worked for a year in the home office of an insurance company in Hartford. And it was not a year that was wasted, amateur radio-wise. I won both the CQ, CW, and ARRL CWDX contests that year. And at age 22, got appointed to the Contest Advisory Committee by Robert York Chapman, W1QV, W1 Quivering the Virgin. Those are his phonetics, who was a legend in southeastern Connecticut. He had been involved. He had been on the air since the early 20s, and Bob was just a legend. So Anyway, after a few months of writing letters, communicating among CAC, of course we did that all by mail at the time, put a stamp on the envelope. Ellen White was the liaison, and what that meant was everything that we circulated went to Ellen, and she had to get it duplicated and mailed out to 11 of us who done by call areas in those days. So I think that finally she got tired of this and went to see Perry Williams, WNUED, and said, Perry, can't you hire this guy so we can get him off the CAC and I don't have so much work to do? So Perry did do that. We lost Perry, incidentally, late last year. He passed away. He was anything that's been said about me in my memory applies to Perry. That's where I got most of it. So I started work at ARRL headquarters, and one of my first appointments, one of my first assignments was to support the IARU. The timing could not have been better from my personal standpoint because we were just about to embark on preparing for this legendary 1979 World Administrative Radio Conference. And so I got to do that. I somewhere along the line got an MBA. I'm not sure how I ever managed that. And so in 1982, and there are a couple of people in the room who remember that, Larry, the board having cast about looking for anybody outside to take the job when Dick Baldwin retired at UNRU, they decided they might as well give it to me at age 32. So here, 34 years later, I'm still at the same desk I inherited from Dick Baldwin. And as I've said, my main focus has been on spectrum defense. Allocations, maintaining useful access to the spectrum, fighting off little LEOs, low Earth orbit satellites, fighting BPL, now unintentional emitters of all kinds, with a lot of help from the ARRL lab staff back there, guys. I want to say a brief word about another person we've lost just recently, Evelyn Gosling, W4WIR. Evelyn was the longtime vice director of the Southeastern Division, 22 years. I actually met Evelyn earlier than that. You all know her from, if you've been around a long time, from running Hamburg for many years. I first met Ellen when we were planning the 1976 IARU Region 2 conference, which ultimately ended up being held in Miami Beach. And the reason it was so important was that this was a meeting where we would get all of the global leaders of the Japan Amateur Radio League, of RSGB, of the major international national societies together to agree on a common strategy, a common objective for the conference. And Evelyn helped organize that. Evelyn organized a meeting a little later on where the amateur radio industry got together with us and worked on what ultimately became what was known as novice enhancement, which was really technician enhancement of put techs on 10-meter SSB. That was things she did behind the scenes. I knew about them. I appreciated them. I don't think the general amateur population would have realized how much credit she was owed for those kinds of supporting activities. Well, at this point, I had to tear up what I was planning to say because of an announcement that was made on Thursday. Over the years, I have written more than 400 columns of It Seems to Us on page 9 of QST. It's a discipline of writing to fit 900 words, to say what you want to say in a given amount of space. That also means, by the way, I won't talk too long tonight. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and I know some of you guys need to do some shopping on the way home tonight. And speaking of Valentine's Day, I couldn't have done what I have done without the support of my spouse. Linda K1ZD. Linda, while I was off doing whatever I was doing, Linda raised a terrific daughter of ours, Darren, in UCI. And a few years ago, I made the mistake of commenting to Darren that there was a novelist who had just been picked up by the Oprah Winfrey Book Club and had suddenly skyrocketed to prominence, named Wally Lamb. Well, Wally Lamb was a year behind me in high school at Norwich Free Academy, NFA Radio Club W1HLO. He was not a member. But I made the mistake of commenting to Darren that, gee, Darren, I had the same English teacher as Wally Lamb. So she turns to me in inimitable daughter fashion and says, "So, Dad, why aren't you an award-winning novelist?" She comes by it very honestly because she gets it from Linda, who, when explaining to our non-Ham friends what it is I do, she just says, I'll just say, Dave is a big fish in a very, very small pond. So, Tom, welcome to the pond. But getting back to page 9, out of the 400 plus columns, one of my favorites is December 1993 QST. In that editorial, I described another novice who became licensed at age 13 as KN2ITP. And KN2ITP, and in those days novices had 2-meter privileges. He and his brother entered the ARRL VHF QSO party in June 1955 and made a respectable score for novices. They came back with K2ITP in subsequent years, and they made quite a record for themselves from a farmhouse in southern New Jersey. And this led, at age 17, to this individual having published in QST in December 1958 QST his first scientific paper. It was entitled Working Ionospheric Scatter on 50 Megacycles now. DX when the band is dead. Well, so he had built his reputation in high school. He went on to college and ultimately received a PhD in astronomy from Harvard University. Well, many of you, I know, Joel, have already realized that I'm talking about Joe Taylor, K1JT. In 1974, Joe was a professor at the University of Massachusetts, and he and a grad student, Russell Hulse, WB2LAV, went down to Arecibo. They had an experiment, they had some equipment for the automatic detection of pulsars that they wanted to try out on the big dish down there. Well, at the time, Sam Harris, W1FZJ, was at Arecibo on the staff. Sam had been the World Above 50 columnist for QST for a number of years. He recognized K2ITP. So is it a coincidence that they got time on the dish? I think not. So while they were down there, they spotted more pulsars than had ever been spotted up to that time, but they noticed one that was very interesting. They spotted a binary pulsar. This is 2 neutron stars doing this around one another at a very rapid rate. Well, what happens is that one of the stars is emitting a lot of RF energy. The other one happens is not. And so by the fact that they were doing this, they could tell by Doppler a great deal about the characteristics of this binary pulsar. I'm not going to tell you all about it. If you ever get a chance to hear Joe say it, go. He's the sort of guy who raises the IQ in the room by 10 points just by being there. So they figured out that this was going on 21,000 light years away. These two objects, each with a mass more than our sun, going around like this, generating a radio signal and generating gravitational waves. They observed this over a period of time, and what they were observing was consistent with Einstein's theory of general relativity, which up to that point had not been verified. They could tell from 21,000 light years away that every time these did that once, they drew 1 millimeter closer together. Yeah, think about that. So, needless to say, the title of It Seems to Us, December 1993, was How to Win the Nobel Prize. Because it's obviously, you get in an ARRL VHF contest. And everything else just follows. Well, at the 2012 World Radio Communication Conference, and Kate Craigie was there at the time, and Tim, I know you were there, and a lot of folks were there, because there were over 1,000 delegates in the room when the Secretary General of the ITU presented Joe Taylor with the ITU Gold Medal for his contributions to radio astronomy and radio communication. So picture this. The entire conference has come to a complete halt on a Friday afternoon. The Secretary General says to these 1,000+ delegates, and all of this is being translated into the 6 official UN languages, and he says, I want to introduce you to Dr. Joseph Taylor, who became a radio astronomer by starting out in amateur radio. If you think we don't have respect, I can tell you we do. It was probably the proudest moment I have had in amateur radio, just sitting there watching Joe receive this. What was really neat was the following night, found Joe at 4U1ITU, the International Amateur Radio Club Station, in ITU headquarters. And he was doing the first 23 centimeter moon bounce from there. The staff had they had 17 watts coming out of a transverter to 4 Yagis on the roof. And this is the coldest February I think anybody had ever felt in Geneva. And Joe, using his software, figured out they weren't getting the sort of signal off the moon that they should be getting. And he figured out that the problem was one of the 4 Yagis was out of phase. So up he goes on the roof of the building, freezing cold, blowing off Lake Geneva, and there is our Nobel Prize winner and newest ITU gold medal winner up there on the tower, turning the Yagi over. It was quite a moment. And we made 3 contacts that night, and then the moon went behind the 15-story ITU tower, thereby demonstrating another law of physics, that you're not going to get a signal through that up to the moon. I was sitting next to him most of the night, actually working 160 meters. And I will note, just for the record, that the farthest DX I worked that night was K5UR. So Joe has, of course, moved on to give us JT65, JT9, WSJT, all of these modes that we use today. He's taken what he learned from amateur radio, applied it to radio astronomy, and now he's applying what he learned in radio astronomy to amateur radio. And he turns 75 next month, and I think he's still the 17-year-old who wrote the QST article. So, and he was on for the VHF sweepstakes 2 weeks ago. So, let's see. Let me get back to Thursday's announcement. Gravitational waves were actually detected for the first time. You may have seen the headlines. What happened was 1.3 billion years ago, two black holes merged and let off enough energy in the form of gravitational waves that briefly, according to the article I read, briefly exceeded the energy in all of the visible light in the known universe. Boom. So 1.3 billion years later, here is a group of scientists in the United States who are looking for that exact thing to happen, using laser interferometer gravitational wave observatory, LIGO. I think of it as Lego with an additional div. And Joe Taylor is back in the news. Now think about that. 1.3 billion years ago, this thing happened. 42 years ago, Joe Taylor theorized that it would happen eventually. And now it has been observed. In our little window of time while we have been on the planet, that has happened. So Joe Taylor gets mentioned in the same sentence with Einstein. You might remember the story of Einstein explaining radio, where he says, well, it's really quite simple. You know how the telegraph works. Think of a cat with its tail in New York and its head in San Francisco. And someone in New York pulls the tail and the cat meows in San Francisco. Well, radio is just like that, except there is no cat. What there is the ionosphere and the troposphere, for those who are moving up in the spectrum. Radio is a natural phenomenon. It is part of the natural world. I believe that in every generation, there will be people who want to understand how their world works, including how radio waves propagate beyond line of sight and into space. They will want to harness this natural phenomenon to communicate, not because they must, but because they can. It's the same driving force that makes sailors want to go places by harnessing the wind and the ocean currents. We are the sailors of the electromagnetic waves. I am passionate about amateur radio. I know many of you share my passion, or you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't have done all you have done over the years for ARRL and amateur radio. Our challenge is to explain our passion, how to convey it to younger generations that have grown up at a time when instant global communication is taken for granted. Can we do it? Can we explain the allure of acquiring the knowledge and skill to communicate anywhere on or in orbit around the planet without relying on any infrastructure whatsoever, while using less power than is on one of these chandeliers? I believe we can. I'll say it again. I believe we can. If you believe it, say it with me. I believe we can. Amateur radio is expanding just like the universe. One of the reasons I object to this Mr. Ham radio stuff is that while in 1982 I had done everything it was possible to do in amateur radio, I claim that that's not possible anymore. It is not possible for one person to be doing everything there is available to do in our avocation. It's going in so many different directions. What fascinates young people today is different than for those of us in my soon-to-be fading baby boomer generation. So we don't know what the future will bring. There are so many possibilities. At the ITU in 2012, Joe Taylor speculated about someday communicating using gravitational waves. I doubt that I will live to see that, but this evening, somewhere on this big blue marble, there may be a young person poking at an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi board, probably not at a crystal radio, who will. And I hope that my career has contributed to their being able to do in the future and to have the same opportunities that we have enjoyed. I have cherished the privilege of being able to turn a passion into a career and have not lost the passion along the way. And I will tell you, I have never wanted any other job. So, I've been asked what I will do post-retirement. Well, there's lots of infinite projects. A big long list of things that I need to do, including making Linda louder on 10 meters, and 10 gigs, by the way. And Linda and I will travel while we can, and I hope, as Tim mentioned, that I will have a contribution to make through the IARU for a while longer as a volunteer. Remember the ARRL mission. It's just 10 words. And Rick said it, and I have said it, and I will say it again. To advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. It's a three-legged stool. Please continue to support the mission of the ARRL, support Tom and what soon will be his staff, as you have supported us throughout my tenure. Thanks again, and see you on the air.